All right, well, maybe we'll get started. Thanks everyone for being here today. Good morning. I am Chris Steinkamp. I'm the Executive Director of Mountain Towns 2030, and I just want to thank you for joining us today for the second conversation in our Mountain Wildfire Action Series. I also want to extend a special thank you to the Tahoe Fund and Fireside for their partnership in this entire series and for helping us bring together this outstanding group of guest speakers today and for all of the calls. So with wildfire season now well underway across the West, these conversations are more important than they ever have been. Our goal with these calls is to share practical, actionable strategies that communities can implement to reduce wildfire risk, strengthen resilience, and better prepare for the challenges we really continue to face every day. So today, we're really fortunate to be joined by an all-star panel of guests from the Tahoe region who are at the forefront of wildfire resilience. They represent organizations that are developing innovative policies, building strong cross-partner sector partnerships, securing new funding, and implementing solutions that can serve as models for everybody in mountain communities all across the country. So we're excited to learn about from their experience and their insights and explore some of the ideas that they're tackling that hopefully can be replicated in your communities. So I want to thank Amy Berry from the Tahoe Fund, Jason Brooks from Fireside, Sydney Morrow from the Glenbrook HOA, and soon to be joining us, hopefully, is Eric Horndtvedt from the Truckee Fire Protection District. So let me hand this over to Amy, who's going to lead this conversation. So thank you, Amy.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm really excited for this conversation because we have two absolute champions that are doing real on the ground work. And I think today is really a chance to get your notebooks out and start writing down things that you can do in your communities to make your communities and your neighborhoods safer. So I'm honored to first introduce Sydney Morrow, who is a community champion in a community in Lake Tahoe called Glenbrook. Let's go back. You can see it's on the east shore of Lake Tahoe. And Sydney has done more as an individual living in a community with no official title to rally her community to do everything they can to keep their neighborhood safe from the potential threat of catastrophic wildfire. And so with that, I'd love to turn it over. Sydney, you want to take us through just some quick highlights of what Glenbrook is with the community and how you got involved in this work?
Sure, Amy, and thank you everybody who's joined us today. Although I am the current champion of Glenbrook, I stand on the backs of many other homeowners that went before me. And I'll just briefly describe Glenbrook. The uniqueness of our community is our historical presence on the shore of Lake Tahoe. We're considered the oldest settlement on Lake Tahoe. Because we're responsible for clear cutting the lake and sending all the lumber down to the silver mines in Virginia City. That's not the history we're most proud of, but that definitely was how Glenbrook got here in the first place. After the silver mines played out in Virginia City, Glenbrook morphed into kind of a resort community, and there was kind of this dude ranch here that attracted celebrities and a lot of notable historical figures up to Lake Tahoe to stay in a little hotel was here. And then in the 1980s, when Glenbrook got developed into the modern day community that it is right now, that community ended up surrounding these historical structures. And so the community as a whole still carries this historical significance and celebrates that among our homeowners. And for that reason, wildfire resilience in Glenbrook is really important because we don't want to lose that historical value that we have to a wildfire. And I use that frequently to get people on board. And I know a lot of you in mountain towns have the same mining, lumber type of background that you probably can use to excite your residents.
Can we go to the next slide, please? Sorry, Chris,
yeah.
There we go. Oh, back one. Perfect.
Yeah, so today, whoops.
Nope. Back.
There.
Perfect.
Okay. So today, Glenbrook has been developed into about a 750-acre parcel in which there are 300 homes. We have an HOA that oversees 228 of those homes, and then we just work collaboratively with the other residents around us to keep the community safe. You do see a picture of Glenbrook. It is very scenic, and so we're very proud of that and want to protect it. We work very, very closely with the Tahoe Douglas Fire Protection District, and Amy was very kind to let us join their Fire Smart pilot test about a year and a half ago. So that's kind of our background.
Terrific, great. And we were supposed to be joined by Eric Horndtvedt from Truckee Fire. Unfortunately, I think there's something happening with Truckee Fire right now. We can't quite get a hold of him. This is what happens when you schedule things for fire folks. So Jason Brooks, who is not only a partner with them through Fireside, but a resident in their district, has offered to pinch hit a little bit for Eric until he can join us. So Jason, please give us a little update on Truckee.
Yeah, so I'll set a little bit. Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Chris, for hosting this today. I'll set a little bit of context for those who aren't familiar with where Truckee is and kind of the background on it. And again, just as a reminder, I'm a resident of Truckee. I can't speak on Truckee Fire's behalf. Hopefully, Eric will be able to join us when he's dealing with their issue right now. So just for a little bit of context, Truckee Fire is just the protection district is just north of Lake Tahoe. It includes one incorporated town, two unincorporated counties. There's about 16,000 plus homes in that, which covers about 125 miles. 100% of it's in the WUI, so there's significant wildfire risk out there. And roughly about 25 to 30% of the homes are on the FAIR plan. And for those of you who aren't from California, the FAIR plan is essentially not essentially, it is the plan of last resort when residents in California are unable to get insurance in the traditional market. So the things to really know about Truckee is it's a large community. It covers, it's got multiple jurisdictions when you get into towns and counties. And then there's been quite a bit of insurance pressure on the community that's come as a result of that. And if you go to the next slide, a little bit more setup. There you go. So, I'm guessing probably like a lot of communities or people on this call, it is primarily a second home community. I think 75 to 80% of the homes are considered second homes. Typically from the Bay Area, Sacramento, Reno, that type of thing. But again, a very 80% plus of residents don't live there. 15 to 20% of the homes are short-term rentals, which we'll come back to and talk to in a little bit, and how we work to help support those short-term rental areas. And then 70% were built before 2007. And again, for those not from California, 2007 was a very defining point where WUI codes came into place around housing construction. So again, 2/3 of the housing stock in the community was built before before codes were enforced around best practices when it comes to wildfire resilience. And then it's a diverse range. I mean, there's 10 million, 20, $30 million type homes in gated communities. There's old A-frames that were built by people in the 50s and the 60s themselves, and of course, in manufactured housing. So a little bit of an overview on Truckee. Amy.
Great, thanks. All right, I think we can stop sharing. Perfect. Thanks so much, Chris. All right, great. Well, Sydney, let's start with you. So one thing we hear from communities all the time is we know wildfire is a problem, but where do we even begin? So can you tell us a little bit, like what were your first conversations like? Was there a particular moment that galvanized people into action? What helped move residents from awareness to actually participation? And tell us a little bit about the work you're actually doing in Glenbrook.
So in Glenbrook, as I said before, I stand on the shoulders of a lot of other homeowners that started the discussion probably 10 to 15 years ago. And I will say that in Glenbrook, even though we have an HOA governmental entity, almost all work in here that's significant starts with a homeowner, one or two homeowners, and it starts by them talking to each other. And so that happened around 2010. We had homeowners that were very concerned about our wildfire risk, even way back then, and they began to talk and want to do something about it. And so from the homeowners, then it rippled out to the fire department because that's the first partnership they tried to develop. And that partnership with Tahoe Douglas Fire Protection District has always sat at the core of anything that we do. We don't do anything without telling the fire department what we're going to do. And they come in and they look at everything, they give us feedback, and then we go forward from there. So we start with the homeowners, we rippled out to the fire department. And then we would just start with a small project, and that's the way everything works. We just take maybe a group of homeowners will say, well, let's cut down this tree or let's remove this shrubbery or something, and they'll just start with a little project, and then they'll tell the HOA board of directors, and sometimes HOA would pay for it, and sometimes the individual homeowners would pay for it. So while these little projects were going on, homeowners kept talking to outside entities. And so the ripple effect just would get a little bit bigger. Maybe somebody would call the Nevada Division of Forestry, or they would talk to an environmental group, or in one case, they began to talk to NV Energy, our utility company. And so these partnerships would kind of grow. And then slowly but surely, we began to get outside funding. And I would say the first outside funding we got was a very small grant, maybe $10,000 back in about 2014. And then after that, we got maybe a stream restoration project. We might get a little bit of funding for that, but the HOA was always helping out with that as well. So again, I would liken it to dropping a pebble in the water. You start small, and then everybody just kept talking, and the ripples would get bigger and bigger until we began to get really substantial external funding for very large projects. So today, that's kind of what happened. We're at the bigger funding stage. We have another homeowner in here that decided, honestly, she wanted to bury the power lines in Glenbrook. So the same thing, she developed this little coalition. She got on board with NV Energy. She found out what they needed. And today we stand with all of our power lines buried in a cooperative relationship with our utility company. So I've kind of done the same thing with fuel management, where, I applied for grants. We got a community wildfire defense grant, and now we're removing the fuels around our homes and within our community. But it started small, and we work out bigger and bigger from that.
Great. Sydney, tell us a little bit more about this work. So you're sort of giving an overview, but dive into it. I mean, it's pretty interesting what you've been able to get your neighbors together and pool funds and remove dead trees. And then tell us about the grant that you applied for and how much funding you got.
So recently, we had real galvanizing moments because of the LA fires. We have a lot of Glenbrook, like Truckee, has a lot of second homes up here, but a significant number of those homes, probably in the neighborhood of 10 to 20, were owned by residents in Los Angeles that experienced those fires. We have 2 or 3 residents that actually lost their homes in that fire. And then we have a slew of residents whose childhood homes were also removed in that fire. That was a real galvanizing moment because of the emotional loss that went with that whole entire community being destroyed. And then a lot of them take refuge now in Glenbrook because they don't have a home in Los Angeles anymore. And so they've had these firsthand experiences with fire. And they've been the biggest supporters of doing more in Glenbrook. So again, talking to people, we now had this galvanizing moment with the wildfires. And I've just been living here always believing that the cost pressures that we have to get the work done are huge. It's very expensive to get any fuel reduction work here. But I had this belief that if we could all work together, if we could make a big group project, I could get a vendor that would come in and reduce the cost to the whole community. And so that's what I began working on. I took a little segment of Glenbrook. I got those 40 homeowners to agree to get on board with me. We had the fire department come out and mark trees as an educational effort. So we put pink ribbons all over the trees that the fire department should be removed. And that was another galvanizing moment. People would walk through the area and say, oh my gosh, I had no idea there were that many trees in here that were dangerous. So we let everybody look at that for a while. And then we had 9 vendors who agreed to bid the project. And we sharply reduced the cost of getting those trees removed. I mean, like a the prices haven't been that low in a decade. And that really caused everybody to understand, do it now. You've got this opportunity to do it right now because it will go away. And so that vendor was incredibly responsible, didn't do any damage to the home, got in here with a crane, took the trees out rapidly, and everybody was, clapping their hands, very glad they spent the money because it was all private paid by the homeowner, and everybody was happy. And it was right about that same time that the community wildfire grant came through as well.
And how many trees did you take down, you think, the neighbors? 39 homes, how many trees?
We took out 415 trees across 39 homes. And
Wow.
you wouldn't even, and the funny thing was, we got through taking them down, and people would come through that area and go, I can't even tell you took anything out of here. I'm like, yeah, that's right. That's how overgrown it was.
Hmm.
Or they would say something like, oh, it's so much lighter in here, or I can see, or something like that. The overgrowth of trees, I know in every mountain community, it's excessive. And you can take out a lot of trees and barely make an impact on what you've done. So the grant is extending that now to the rest of Glenbrook.
That's excellent. Terrific. Well, Jason, let's hear a little bit about what Truckee's doing. And we know you can't speak on behalf of Truckee Fire, but I think you've worked so closely with them that you can talk a little bit about it. Truckee has really become a model for how you get communities engaged, and would love if you could share a little bit about what they've been doing to help build momentum around wildfire resilience and some of their tactics to really get the community engaged in this work.
Yeah, no, happy to share some of it. So one of the things that Truckee did that was really innovative and sort of kicked things off, and maybe I should take a step back. Like many communities, Truckee, I mean, again, many communities, probably everyone on this webinar, Truckee has dealt with the community of Truckee has dealt with wildfire for an extended period of time. There's been home losses going back to the 90s. There's been initial attempts at different, we'll call it, ways to increase wildfire resilience in the community. But very specifically, in 2021, a measure was put to the voters. It was called Measure T. And what that did is it created a dedicated tax, a dedicated funding stream for wildfire prevention. And I underline the word prevention. It wasn't for suppression, it wasn't for other things. It really created a dedicated set of funds that the voters said, we are willing to tax ourselves, we're willing to contribute to that. It works out to about $180 per parcel in the district. And that was passed by 80% of the voters. So very, very clear signal that the voters, the members of the residents of Truckee wanted to really invest into wildfire resilience. Of that funding stream, and again, it might be stuff that others can look at on this webinar as a path to follow. But what that funding stream really did is it focused on two initiatives. One is how to help residents make their home resilient. As I mentioned, there's a lot of homes that were struggling with insurance challenges. So how do you help solve that is one of the ways is to really increase the resilience home by home, including resident education, and then also accelerating forestry land projects around the community. So this isn't a lot of work like we'll say, miles and miles away in the Forest Service. This is really in that buffer zone, the area, the interface area that was being done on top of that. So kind of on the back of that funding stream, it created a couple things. One, it showed that the political will was there. It created the funds to be able to make investments into this. And then on the back of that, Truckee's really been successful at heavily engaging all the homeowner associations that are in the community. So there's a dedicated program to engage the HOAs, help the HOAs do their own assessments, do their own education to bring all of those particular residents along. And then also working with some of the other tools that they have, whether it's short-term rental permits or even partners that are doing other types of mitigation work, like the ski resorts, which we can talk about.
Great. Excellent. Terrific. Sydney, there was a question in the Q&A. Do you know what happened to the trees that were taken out? Is there a strategy to use the fuel in another way, i.e. waste to energy projects? So do you know where they took the trees that they took down from Glenbrook?
Yes, and in the first go around, I was very, very lucky because the vendor that took the trees had a relationship with sawmills in California and had a place to take them. And they had the equipment to cut the trees in the correct length, which are 12-foot long logs that you need to go into a sawmill. They also have X-ray equipment at their lumber yards so they could find metal that's in the trees. This is another issue for the sawmills. You can't run logs through a saw and hit what's left of a hammock in somebody's trees. So they had the infrastructure to do all of that work that's needed for the sawmills, and then they have a logging, hauling permits in California to carry those trees down to the sawmill. So those trees all got utilized, particularly the cedars, the firs, anything that could go to a sawmill was taken to a sawmill. The projects that I'm doing now are less successful because the company that got the bid for the project cannot cut those logs into 12-foot long lengths, and that's really important if you want to sell your timber to the sawmills. So first go around, everything got used. Second go around, we're working on what to do with the timber because it's too short to go to the sawmills. Bet you didn't know that. There's this whole background of sawmill usage that you have
Yeah,
to.
lots of, yeah, it's a great question. And actually, just down the hill from Glenbrook is a brand new sawmill that's being retooled right now in partnership with Tahoe Forest Products and the Washoe Tribe. Actually, it's on tribal land, and it sits on one of the very original sawmill locations back from the 1860s, from the Comstock load day. So once that sawmill is back up and running in the next 6 months or so, that will be a great location to take a lot of this wood. But it's a huge issue because we have too many trees in the forest, and then how do we take them out? But then when we take them out, what do we do with them? So we're constantly looking for new solutions, and that can be biochar, that can be biomass, that can be sawmills, a combination. Really, everything we can find, we need to build. So.
Well, I think, Amy, I think it's that like becomes really important too. And speaking again to the Truckee area, Truckee runs a really aggressive green waste program designed to remove vegetation near the home. So this is like slash or small stuff that this isn't the professional logs that are being dropped. This is the homeowners doing work or maybe having a contractor limbing up different things, which is, super critical material because it's the stuff often very close to the homes, but all of it is smaller piles. Again, none of this is over 12 feet. These are homeowners doing the work, but you've got to get it out of there and create it. And the way that program works in Truckee, right, as a resident can go online, essentially we'll call make a reservation or make a request, and a truck with a grappling arm will come by that within 5 days. It can be up to 10 days, but that the commitment is to try to get to all that material within 5 days. So the resident can do the work, put it by the pile, a truck comes through with a grappling arm. The key to all of what we were just talking about, and for people to think about this, is what do you do with that material, right? Which takes you to the biochar, it takes you to the biomass type of scenarios, because the majority of the cost is the disposal cost of that. And there's some different kinds of innovation that are happening out there around how you can kind of you can actually like recover that fuel for, we'll call it clean energy when you burn it and put it in a burner and stuff. But that is where some of the investments need to happen.
Yeah, and actually, Measure T has driven so much green waste to the landfill that Placer County, the county next to Truckee, that they are actually building a new biomass facility at the landfill, and they'll be creating biochar from all of that. So it's fairly circular. And then
Yeah.
at North Star Community Service District, which services North Star Ski Resort, they're actually putting in biomass to heat boilers. So they're replacing their oil boilers with wood boilers so that they can take the chips from the landfill and bring them back over and start providing heat with that wood that they're removing from the forest, which is sort of a big circle to reduce the threat of catastrophic wildfire. Yeah. All tied together. Great. All right, Sydney, can you tell us more about the Community Wildfire Protection grant that you got? How did you find out about it? How did you apply? How much money did you ask for? How much money did you get? And what will you do with this money?
So I began the journey for the federal funding about 4 years ago. We had a homeowner that had seen the grant become available online, and he knew I had an interest in writing grants. I used to do that in my former career, and I hadn't done it in about 30 years, and I just went, oh, I'd like to see if I could still do that. So he knew I was interested, and he called me and said, hey, here's this website, go look at it. So I did. I looked at the website and I went to they will provide training sessions for you. They'll tell you if you get in early enough, you can go to meetings and they'll tell you what they want to see in the grant. So I attended those and I went, oh yeah, well, this sounds doable. And at first we were going to use a grant writer. That was very expensive and we just decided to drop it. And I decided to go ahead and try it myself. So on the first go around, we did not get funded, but they will always give you scores on the proposals that you submitted. So you can see how far away you were from actually getting funded by looking at the score sheets at the end. And so I did that and I could see, well, relative to the other the other proposals, I'd scored pretty well, just not quite high enough to get the funding. So the second year came around and the Nevada Division of Forestry encouraged me to try again. You know, the score was pretty good. And so I agreed to do that. I changed parts of the grant to be more tourist centric than I had originally. And then sure enough, the second go around, we did receive funding. We received $2.9 million. And that money will be used to do all the fuel reduction around the perimeter of our community, plus remove 1,200 trees that's stipulated in the grant.
And when you say they, can you tell us who they is?
Oh, they is the U.S. Forest Service and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So when you apply for federal funds, there's a lot of people now that will help you if you just take advantage of it when you set out to do the grant writing. And so the Nevada Division of Forestry, they ran between the Forest Service and myself. I would ask tons of questions as I was writing the application. They were really quite good about saying, well, go this direction or this doesn't look too good. I did ask for feedback from them all the way through. And then at the end of 2 years, I had to try twice. We were funded by the U.S. Forest Service. In Nevada, they give that grant money to the state, not directly necessarily to the person that wrote the grant. And I could see why they did that because we are an HOA, and that's very unusual to give a grant of that size to a homeowners association. So I could see that they might want somebody in the state looking over my shoulder and make sure I didn't mess up too much. So it's a little bit convoluted, maybe. I don't. What I found more than anything is you have to be persistent and you cannot be expected to be funded the first time. That very rarely happens. You have to try more than once. So those of you in other communities, if you tried one time and you were discouraged, try again and again and again, because things change over time and the scoring criteria change and you do run a chance. You just can't quit after the first time.
Right. Persistence.
Did I answer your question?
That's your superpower, Sydney, having seen you in action, getting this community rallied.
I am slightly persistent.
So Jason, let's switch back over to Truckee for a sec. Truckee has a lot of vacation home rentals, and I think Truckee has done something really clever to try to use short-term rental permits as a way to drive more home hardening and defensible space work. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the thing that Truckee has done that's been one of the areas that's been really innovative, and again for policymakers and such on on this webinar is not every resident in your community is the same, right? You've got people that might live that might be a short-term rent. They have a home, but they put it on Airbnb. Maybe they're selling their home. They're a permanent resident, right? So if you start to break the community down into those different cohorts or groups, you can then think about all the tools you have to help. I'll say encourage those property owners to make their home resilient. And specifically with short-term rentals, one of the things that, then again, I believe this is common in other places as well, but that to have a short-term rental, in other words, to put your ski home on Airbnb, you must get a permit either from the county or from the town. And this was set up to make sure that not every home was on Airbnb and those kinds of things. So there was an existing permitting infrastructure or permitting process for short-term rentals. What Truckee was able to do is essentially add, we'll call it a fire, life, and safety aspect to that. And again, without getting too technical, sometimes they would visit these homes and make sure the smoke detectors work and that evacuations are noted for life and safety. Well, one of the life and safety considerations is the wildfire resilience of the home. That is the defensible space and the other things around it. So the long and short of where all this takes is by leveraging the existing short-term rental permit process that was already set up, already existed in the town and the county, they're able to require anyone who has a short-term rental permit to maintain their home against defensible space standards. And what that's done is it effectively has taken 15 to 20% of the housing stock and created a mechanism to, number one, enforce defensible space standards. So now you can get 1 out of 5 homes effectively to be resilient. And you're doing it for people that are already making money off of their homes. So you're not asking some long-term homeowner to make a change. You're asking people that already have again, have a revenue stream off of that. It's a business expense. It's been incredibly effective, right? And I would really encourage people to consider tools like that. And we could talk, I could talk also about kind of like the new sale program, but I would really encourage people to think about, are there different ways you can slice up your community and then use what tools you already have, or maybe with a very tiny policy tweak to be able to leverage that. So again, just kind of statement is really thinking about how to leverage those short-term rental permits in a means to increase the resilience of those homes. The other thing, as I just mentioned, that I'll just talk about because it ties into that, is how do you leverage or how do you think about residents who are new to the community? So one of the things that Truckee Fire has done really well is I kind of call it welcome to the WUI package. But anytime a home is sold or a condo or a housing unit is sold in the district, there's now a process where that is identified and information is sent to that homeowner, making sure they're educated about what it means to now live in the WUI. Like some of these people are moving from new areas that they're not familiar with the climate or the conditions of wildfire. So making sure they're educated around that, what's expected of that. And very specifically to Truckee, again, they passed an ordinance that requires home to become compliant at that time of sale or within a year or thereafter. So there's also this mechanism to what I'll say require residents to take action within a year of the home sale. And that again is another lever that's a very effective way as housing stock turns over to increase compliance and increase resilience.
So clever. I love that they did that. That's great. Okay, Sydney, let's go back to Glenbrook for a sec. So you've obviously done a lot of work. I think you're being humble about how hard it is to get members of a HOA together to pool funds to take down over 400 trees, to get this grant. What's one lesson you've learned along the way that you wish you knew at the beginning of your work? Or said another way, what's a mistake, although I don't think you make very many mistakes, that you'd encourage another community to avoid in this process?
One thing that I realize now that I didn't appreciate enough is really the need to document outcomes. I mean, I'm a scientist by background, so I do know that outcomes have to be put forward. What I didn't appreciate, though, is how important it is not only to report those, but to promote the work you've done. Even if it seems like a very small project to you, there is a need for promotion, and that is not my strength at all. Because I don't like to talk about myself, and I just don't like promotion generally as an individual. Fortunately, I'm surrounded by a lot of people that think I'm a nut, and so they do the promotion for me. And so I can give you examples. We always document our outcomes to our permitting agencies, whatever mechanism they want, we get it documented in there. So we have an established track record going forward. But we did a small stream restoration project. At the time, it didn't seem like much to me, but the vendor that did it called us and said, "Hey, can I submit that for what's called a Best in the Basin award?" And that's given out by the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency for different environmental or fire safety projects that go on in the basin. So we said, yes, you can do that. We looked over the submission and we said, okay, that's fine. Well, that resulted in a Best in the Basin award. And so that amplifies Glenbrook's name in the public because the news media covers that. There were pictures of the stream and the beavers that are in there now and all the other stuff that we had done. And so Glenbrook comes across as a very proactive community. And then Amy has saved me from myself personally, as have other people that are happy to go promote what Glenbrook does. When you start even a small project in any town, it's more important than I ever realized to have a kickoff event to tell everybody what you're doing. And then when you complete it, it really is very important to celebrate that in some form or fashion and to call in, all these ripples that you've created to come in and say, look and see what we've done. Again, that goes against my nature, but it probably is why we got that U.S. Forest Service grant. Our name had been out a lot. We had a track record of having partnerships. And again, thanks to Amy, we were celebrating what we did. And so I would encourage you, even if it's just some little stream that you rechanneled, if there's more birds in there now, tell everybody that you did it. Don't keep that to yourself, because that's what I had a tendency to do, and that would have been a mistake for us.
Great point. So one thing I want to talk about is the use of fire aside to do defensible space inspections. And Sydney, I know you ran into a little bit of a challenge in your HOA because they weren't super excited about having the fire district come through the local community. I'm sure this is something we see all the time. Defensible space inspections are absolutely critical to understanding what your risk is so that you can fix it and be more safe. But we often see a lot of communities that are like, I don't either they don't want an inspector to come do the inspection, or they don't want to open their report because they don't want to know. And Jason, obviously this is your business. So I think this is happening in places in Truckee and as well as Glenbrook. Can you talk a little bit about, Sydney and Jason, how you get around that by bringing in private contractors to do the defensible space inspections, working with your fire districts?
Well, here I've tried to turn it around and say, I need the community to come together so we can prove to insurance companies that as a community, we're recognizing our limitations, and that I think Glenbrook was better off than we realized, that really we would be finding positive outcomes, not all the negativity you think you're going to find. And that did seem to kind of work. The other thing the community really has begun to enjoy is having a private person do the inspection and then come back and do a consultation with them. So by having a private inspector, part of it, our fire department is nothing but cooperative with the homeowner and everything, but the private contractor can come back in and say, I'm not trying to be on your case. It's just you're going to lose your insurance if you don't take care of this 5-foot space around your house. I'm just telling you that this is what the insurance, and we focus everything on insurance now to get them on board. And the people that have met with him have been thrilled. They really enjoy what he has to say. I think everything goes back to the fire department. They can see everything that we're doing, but it's calmed it down maybe a little bit. So there's somebody between the homeowner and the fire department. If they have an issue, they can maybe yell at the contractor a little bit. I don't know. It hadn't really been happening. So it's been a very positive thing for us to have that done privately.
That's
And
terrific.
the fire side is great for us. It's really moving us towards ember hardening the homes, not just stuff in your yard. It's been really, really good.
Right.
Thank you, Sydney. Yeah, I'd say I kind of build off of that, and I think there's things for the policymakers and the people in this webinar to consider, right? Which is one is there are fire departments, I by far we're seen as one of the most trusted sources for this, right? If you have a question about wildfire, who do you call? You call your fire department and your chief or your local teams, but they are by far the trusted source in this. They also have resource constraints. As we saw today, Truckee Fire is dealing with an emergency and they have to prioritize response and other things. So there are things that happen that sort of prevent them from necessarily always being able to get to every single resident, either financially or just other emergencies. And that's where like the HOAs or the private contractors can become such a force multiplier for your community. So in Truckee, and again, I'm assuming like many mountain towns, there's many HOAs. Some of them, again, are super affluent, some are just smaller, but there's these HOA organizations that are able to essentially be a force multiplier for the fire department, helping to ensure that good data is being collected, which improves the wildfire risk models, ultimately driving down some of the insurance in the community, and then also really creating views so that as what Sydney said, how are we doing? Celebrate the success. Well, the only way you can celebrate success is if you're able to show, again, at an HOA level, hey, 80% of our homes have already taken action this year. 40% of people have already created zone zero. When you can communicate those types of wins, then you can show people progress. Otherwise, it's just sort of an abstract concept. So a key message or thing I would encourage, people to consider, and there's a lot of really good playbooks out there that can be shared on how how to better harness and leverage the energy in your HOAs as a force multiplier for your programs, and then but ensuring you're measuring it at that level and then rolling it back up to the community.
Great, thanks. Um, and there are a couple questions from John Clark. Hello, Mayor Clark. So it's called Fire Aside, and that is defensible space inspection software. Jason is the founder of that company. So it used to be back in the old days, the inspector would come out, they would scribble on a piece of paper and hand it to you and tell you which trees to take down. And Jason, I can brag about him on his behalf. He was able to build a software where it's now fire inspectors go out with iPads and there's a whole standardized checklist and they can actually take photos of any of the infractions or violations, and then the homeowner will be emailed a report that tells them very clearly, like, here's what you're doing well, here's what you need to change. And then they can make those changes, upload new photos, and then the fire district can go in and see all of that data and give them the thumbs up and let them know that they have met the requirements to be a fire safe home, which is great. And then what we really love about Fire Aside is that we are now able to pull all of that data and aggregate it into some of the models. And that's helping us better understand what the true risk is in a community and how we can mitigate that risk and buy that risk down very quickly to an entire community by having different members of the community do their work. And that can be defensible space work, that can be home hardening work. And so it's rather than just sort of knowing these things were happening out there and hoping people were doing them, now we actually have really strong data that's driving decision making, especially around the mitigation efforts. So it's been a real game changer. And Jason, it's your company, so I shouldn't be talking about you, but it's really
Oh,
helped
no.
us a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah. So something that came up, with Fireside actually, and just in general, is just the modeling that's now available to communities. And so Sydney and Glenbrook, they're part of what we call our Fire Smart Community Pilots, which is really about using the latest wildfire modeling to look at what the risk is to a community and then doing mitigations from the public lands, utility corridors, right into the neighborhoods to better understand how you can mitigate risk at every level. And with each mitigation, remodeling to understand how did we drive risk down, and then working with a professor, Dr. Mahmood at Vanderbilt, to help understand what the urban conflagration risks are and how we can prioritize mitigation so that the highest priority homes are the ones that get the funding to do that work. And Sydney, I just wanted to share a little story, which is Sydney had her $2.9 million grant. She was ready to go. And then we were able to bring in a series of modelers, Vibrant Planet and Xyloplan and Fireside. And together they modeled the Glenbrook community. And what they found was that there were higher priority areas to begin the work than what was originally intended when Sydney first wrote her grant. So Sydney, I believe you have redesigned your plans to follow more of what the model was saying to try to drive down that risk sooner. Is that accurate?
Yes, and I've been given access to the Vibrant Planet data. We've run with the Tahoe Fire and Fuel teams. Now we've run several new modeling. Um,
Scenarios.
so yeah, thank you, scenarios. And so those are driving everything that we do now. And when I report data back to the state, I use Vibrant Planet data to justify why I'm working where I'm working. So again, if you get access to some of the models these are very expensive to purchase. We don't purchase it ourselves, but we go through a partner that will let us use it to do modeling for our own community. And Vibrant Planet has been very helpful, as has Fireside. Our homeowners love Fireside. So, but those are new innovative softwares that, in my opinion, are worth the money for purchasing and maintaining because they've been so helpful here.
Right. Great to hear. Terrific. All right. Well, we're coming towards the end. Jason, I know I asked this to Sydney, and we're supposed to ask this to Eric, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, but do you have any advice? Because you work with so many communities and so many mountain towns, you can see all the logos over your shoulder. Any advice for how people should get started, or how other communities can make their communities safe as well?
I think so. The advice, I don't know if advice is right. The scars, maybe the lessons learned to be a better way
Yeah.
to characterize it. I think that the thing I stress so much right now to people that we speak to and programs that are started is sort of like a twofold thing. One is a lot of this work is behavior change. We have to get people to change how they interact and think about stuff. And behavior change is really hard. I mean, like just hard work, right? Like it is changing our perceptions of what our homes look like. It's changing things that I want to do. So just recognize that's the business that we are in. Everyone on this call, we are in the business of behavior change, and it's hard. But we just have to, that doesn't mean we don't do it. We just have to prepare for that. So it's like, so I say that to like really stress that point, and then to build off of that, be prepared for it being a long game. I would say what we're now seeing in the communities where we've operated for like, 4 or 5 years is that's what it's taking to get a home from starting to do things to really being dialed in and being resilient. Unless it's like in the real estate sale or a short-term rental moves, those will go really fast. They'll go from like we'll call a disaster to being in really good shape because there's a strong forcing mechanism. But the vast majority of homes will do a little bit this year, a little bit next year, a little bit next year. And so as a programmer, policymaker, you need to be thinking in those sort of terms. How am I going to get people to shift over 3, 5 years and have and you'd be kidding yourself if you think you're going to get it all done in one season. And so try to round that up. I mean, it's really just recognizing that from a policy standpoint, you need to be thinking in a 5, 7 year type horizon and recognize you're going to have to work each single home one by one over that time frame. So that's the advice, or just not advice. I guess it's just be prepared for that's what you're signing up to do if you want your town to be resilient to wildfire.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. Sydney, any last thoughts? And then we'll open it up to questions. I've seen some come through, but if anyone has any questions, please put it in the Q&A tool.
I just wanted to talk to any kind of governmental entities that might be listening. There was a new innovation up here in the basin that I'd never seen before, and I just wanted to call it to your attention, particularly surrounding unincorporated areas of your county where you just have homes in there and there's really no governing entity over the top of it. There was a gentleman here that I believe runs a waste management company. He's the guy that picks up the trash. And he decided to use his company as the entity for a group of unincorporated homes to get them a FireWise certification. I thought that was really innovative because here was a private sector individual who knew that he had this group of homes. They couldn't get organized, and yet he decided to use his company as a preliminary way to organize these homes for fire action. So if you have maybe small utility companies, waste management companies, even water co-ops, that might be an alternative for you all to look at in these unincorporated areas of communities because those owners do want to do something. They're not opposed to helping out. And I just wanted to throw that out there because I thought that was really unique. I like that.
That's a great example. Great. All right. Well, thank you all very much. I don't see any questions. I don't know if anybody has any. I'm really sorry Eric wasn't able to join us today. Hopefully everything is okay with Truckee and Truckee Fire. There's a fire just north of Truckee right now that I think they're working on. So,
Amy,
Chris,
Amy,
for
thank you
having
so
us.
much. Yeah, that was awesome. Jason, Sydney, thank you very much. I obviously you are much closer to this issue than I am. And what I'm hearing over the last couple of calls is that, obviously, Jason, your thoughts about thinking about this whole issue as a multi-year idea is really, really smart because it's not going to be something that people can solve overnight, but it has to start with a risk assessment. And for anybody on the call, hopefully you got that message loud and clear, because that seems to be the number one first step. So Jason, thank you for pinch hitting for Eric. You did a great job, and hopefully he's okay. Sydney, thank you very much for your insights as well. And Amy, as always, thank you for moderating and taking the conversation forward. So thank you very much. And thank you all for being here today. The third call in our series is focused on utilities and resorts. We have some great guests lined up from Kirkwood, from Homewood, from Holy Cross Energy, I think from Liberty as well. Amy, is that the other utility as well?
I think PG&E.
PG&E, right. So hopefully you all can join us for that. It's on July 24th at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. So you'll all get an invitation and a link to register for that. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any of us. I'll follow up with everyone's email if you want to reach out to anybody on the call directly as well. So wait, there's one other call. Oh yes, this is being recorded, and I will send a recording out to everybody. So within the next 24 hours. So keep an eye out. And until then, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Jason, Amy, Sydney, thank you. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.